All right, Kiss Army, welcome to the KissFAQ Podcast. Thank you for giving us your time today and letting us into your head. I hope we don't do any damage. This is a Kiss-related podcast by the board, for the board. We hope that you enjoy. Welcome to episode 250 of the KissFAQ Podcast. I'm your host, Julian Gill. Today I'm joined by Alex and friend Daniel, he's on the board, and Ken, the voice of reason, 69th Blizzard. Let's do a little bit of news. I think first and foremost is the video's already up on the channel, so if you've already seen it and wondered why, let me just give you a little bit of backstory on it. WYSP 94 radio station LP, obviously early 1980s. In particular, record stations love to do their own little promos. Who's typing? That hurts my ears.
Sorry.
Mute me while I monologue. So years and years ago, Fancy Mix, or was it Fancy Fair? I think it was Fancy Mix, one of the early Japanese bootlegs that came out, came with a bunch of non-Kiss songs on it. I think one of them was by Zon on that one. But another one of the demos attributed to Kiss on that bootleg was Thunder in My Heart, and it's been a search ever since. Each one of those has been progressively debunked, whether it was Wet 'n Wild, Rock Me Slowly, which were attributed to Eric Carr, 1980s Ladies, which was Circus Circus, Blackie Lawless, of course. The two Zon songs, which I think were attributed to Mark St. John. Take It All From Me, and I don't remember the other title off the top of my head. Ring Dang Do obviously was the Jumping Gene Simmons. But Thunder in My Heart remained elusive. And it's not just good enough to say it's not Kiss. You have to be able to say who it is and where it was from in order to completely say, that it's legitimately debunked. And this one, it was suggested was by Cagney and the Dirty Rats. Even got in touch with members of that band, which included Mark Torian of pre-Bullet Boys fame. Nothing. Bought albums that had the title on it.
Ken.
And year after year after year, we're never able to uncover it. Well, Alex Bergdahl, Talvis, as many people know, got in touch and mentioned, that he had seen this listing on Discogs for this album, which had the title misspelled. So I picked up a couple copies of the record to confirm it.
Ken, you have to mute yourself.
Thank you. That's so funny. All right. Obviously, my monologue is dragging on, but the crux of the story is Thunder in My Heart is indeed on this by a band called US Airwave. 1981 is when the sampler came out, and Alex got in touch with one of the members of the band. I think one of his friends maybe have given him, and there are a couple of others, Magnus, and I don't remember the other chap's name, who were involved in kind of uncovering all of this. Got in touch with them, and he said, yeah, that's our song. And we put it out on a sampler. They opened up for Cinderella, polygram Cinderella, and that's the story of the band. So it ended up on this sampler. Always look inside your records, people, because this one had a ballot that you could send in to choose which was your favorite song. And on that mention, I was up at a record store the other day, and they had a copy of Love Gun. Wasn't going to buy it. Looked inside, had some clippings in it. Not toenail, newspaper. So that was really cool. Always check inside records. All right. What other news? Ace Frehley. I looked on the FAQ today. There's 5 threads with Ace in it. Ace is going deaf, according to Eddie Trunk. Yeah, no shit. That's why he absolutely surrounds himself with monitors, because he can't hear anything. That's not news. Ace says it's sad that Kiss couldn't sell out Madison Square Garden. Yeah, tickets were still on sale late in the day, but it did sell out eventually. And he said, I offered my services and they just haven't made the decision to bring me back. And that's okay because I'm having a lot of fun as a solo artist. But I'm also concerned about the fans as well. I want to give the fans the biggest bang for their buck, and they're not getting it at this juncture. Daniel, is the spaceman spacing out? Has he gone space cadet? Or what do you think on that comment?
I just think he likes money. Playing with Kiss gives him hell of a lot more money than playing in front of 500 persons. So I think that's the real deal here. He's been trying for months to get into Kiss, but eventually he might when ticket sales start to, is it called dwindle or dwell? I always mix them up.
Dwindle, perfect word.
Dwindle, yeah,
Dwindle.
yeah. And so I think if they continue the tour for 2 years, he might do some shows with the band, but for now, no way. So he can just continue with his solo band, and it's pretty good.
Yep, absolutely. Ken, what are your thoughts on Ace? I'll just lead into the other statement that he's recently made as well, and this was speaking to Tulsa World about the general perception that he was the coolest member of Kiss. If you look at the polls on the internet, I wish I could do an Ace voice. If you look at the polls on the internet, I was voted the most liked member of the band. So I don't know. If you believe the polls on the internet, I guess it's true. In my mind, I probably was the coolest guy. Paul Stanley and Gene Simmons really didn't have the street smarts that I had. They lived a more sheltered life. Right now, Peter Criss is shooting a Christmas tree. Ken, what's your take on the psychology of Ace Space Cadet Frehley?
Yeah, that's an interesting comment. I mean, and the other thing about the, Kiss selling out, or being able to sell out. I mean, he's just a little dig because he's not been invited back into the band as a replacement for his replacement. but so yeah, he's still, it's kind of a sore thing with him. I think he would have already showed up on one of their, shows had they, really invited him. And maybe he doesn't want to because he says if not going to be full time, then forget it. I'm not going to show up. So as for the other comment about him being, was it the or the favorite, or what was the word?
The most popular?
Popular, yeah. Favorite, popular. Well, maybe it was. I don't know. Maybe as far as, the solo albums, if you can go at that point, because it did very well. Otherwise, I don't know. Everyone has their favorites. So I don't believe any of that stuff anyway. I have my favorite, Gene, and I think yours is Paul, and so on. Everyone, and someone else's Ace, and so you have a little, favoritism within it. But I don't think anyone is, that much more than the other.
Yeah, if I have to pick one these days, it's Peter. He doesn't make silly comments on the internet. He doesn't posture.
True.
He's just humble. He's cool. He's awesome, and that suits me just fine. Paul Stanley says, of course, that the door is still open for these guest appearances. I guess it's still open to aliens appearing on stage as well. But, everything's possible. Is it probable? That's probably semantics, very clearly. You're doing a good job. That was a good belch out of her, Alex.
Thank you.
The last bit of news, Mr. Vinny. His attempt to trademark Vinnie Vincent's Kiss, down in flames, and no one was surprised. Nice job, Vinny. Got to give him like a cookie or something for persistence, tempting that tiger as if he hasn't lost enough in legal fees by now. All right, let's get into today's topic. Daniel came up with a really good suggestion of a kind of a what-if scenario, and it basically is, what era would we most like to see given Andrew Scambatti's Greatest Show on Earth treatment? And of course he has Kiss at Midnight coming out June the 28th, I believe. I've seen an early cut of it, and it is absolutely fantastic. If you enjoyed The Greatest Show on Earth, you're going to love his new video. And of course, he's doing the rounds on various podcasts at the moment. He was just on Podcast Rock City. I think he's got Kiss Room as well coming up. So it's an interesting concept, Daniel. I mean, you start off with, why that era? How would you start it off? When would it end? What sort of interviews would you like to include and whatnot? So why don't you tell us a little bit about the concept? And I'm going to let you go first on this, since it would be a terrible thing for me, having done no preparation this week, to come out with my idea and steal yours. So go for it.
Well, like many other Kiss fans, I really enjoyed the video that he did, Andrew. And I thought to myself, wouldn't it be great to hear different Kiss fans giving their ideas on their favorite era? Maybe, we like so different eras of the band. Some guys are into the originals. Some guys found Kiss in the 2000s, and it would be great to hear fans talking about their favorite era, which meant the most to them. I think it could be some really passionate ideas, and I guess there are many ways to do this. Personally, I chose the revenge era. First off, I tried to make a synopsis to a film from 92 to 95, but it was just too much stuff, so I had to, cut it after like alive. So I did a brief synopsis, if you want to hear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It keeps me from talking for longer.
Yeah. So the film would be called The Revenge Era, and it would basically deal with Kiss trying to rise from the ashes. Kiss is firing on all cylinders live, but I guess times have changed. And as the film progresses, it'll be obvious that no matter what they do, they can't make it. Despite sounding awesome live, they're kind of doomed. And the film would also try to take you on a ride through 90s music and movies, maybe. I like the way Andrew did when he, you felt the street buzz in the film he did. So I've tried to incorporate some sort of, early 90s feel using movies and music that people know of. So, I was a big movie buff back in the day as well. But it's important to have the right balance between the movie clips and the Kiss clips that I suggested, because Kiss has to be like the main thing. But I think you can sprinkle the film quite a bit with a few well-chosen film clips, and also include some of the current affairs that were going on at the time. So just to put the Revenge in some sort of context, and maybe using a few different arcs and parallel stories, and I think it would be a kind of a nice film, but it wouldn't end that well. But every film doesn't need a happy ending.
No, we could talk more about kind of the ending and the interviews. That's a good starting point for your movie. Alex, what era would be the one that you would like a similar sort of treatment? I also threw in that, for those of you who've seen Alan G. Parker's movie, I think it was 50 years ago today, on the Sgt. Pepper's album, that was a great way of looking at just doing kind of an era-specific documentary. I still wish if the Kiss one he had done was anything like that quality. It just makes it even more of a shame that it didn't make it out. Right, Alex, what's your idea?
I flip-flop between two. I was flipping between the Dynasty period, with kind of brief mentions of the earlier years. But I really got stuck and really thought it'd be great if they could do something Creatures related. I know there's really not much full Creatures live shows, but with enough interviews using the press footage of the stage and everything, I think you can make a good hour-long Creatures type of like special. With some of the shows, some of the videos from Rio, in Brazil, that Montreal, not the bootleg, unless you want to, unless you do like a cool little caption, like fan film footage, and maybe showed Benny playing the Looney Tunes theme. But actually not Montreal, but it was New Orleans. I think there was like a good audience front row press of just Creatures of the Night from the front row. I think it was in New Orleans.
Yeah, I think it was news footage from there. So,
but I think you could do something cool and then have it end with just have the credits end with J.J. Jackson's voice going, we're now going to see Kiss without makeup for the very first time, and then end it like that.
Good starting point. Again, we'll go back and talk about some of the interviews and maybe some of the other stuff that we'd all like to see in each one of these, but we'll just get the general errors each one of us want to talk about. Now, Ken, has he nicked your idea, and have you had to flip to plan B for yours? And you're on mute still.
No.
That's a relief.
Not really. I guess the one I chose, I thought, choosing maybe a year or two. Then I just started thinking what was more interesting to me is Kiss trying to stay kind of similar to Daniels in a way, but trying to stay relevant through a period of time, and a long period of time, mostly the 80s. But I kind of start with like Kiss's Last Hurrah, where Peter Criss leaves the band, and then they bring in Eric Carr for Unmasked. They do the Australian tour, huge success, but that's it. Everywhere else, they're kind of starting to drop off. And so then they try to stay relevant to, going through The Elder, and showing that was a mistake of an idea to try to do that, to appease the critics. And then trying to, we're going to, try to get back into, Creatures of the Night, try to be heavy again, relevant. But then it still doesn't really work. And then, about they can talk about the sales and so on. And then the lick it up part where they take the makeup off to try to stay relevant, and which it kind of works. And then continuing through the trends, I guess you could say, of the 80s, all of the 80s, where they're still trying to, the Bon Jovi stuff, whatever, all that. But earlier in the time period, they can talk about, some of the bands that opened for, like AC/DC, Judas Priest, become, and the British Invasion, the newer heavy metal British Invasion, become bigger than them, and they're trying to keep up with them through the 80s and so on, and trying to stay relevant, and ending where, I guess hot in the shade, where they kind of get their minds back, and they start celebrating their earlier history of music. So that kind of documentary, or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, you just touched on something that, I think is ripe for an updating, and it's not what I would pick today, but The Inner Sanctum. If you think about what that documentary was, I think that could be redone, considering the amount of footage that now circulates and exists, and be done in a much better way by Andrew or someone, like that. But it's not what I would pick. I would go with Danger Zone. And you know exactly what I'm going to talk about now, just because, again, it's not that the music's grown on me particularly. I think your daughter wants more screen time. It's because I think it makes a good story. It starts off with, footage from the Asylum Tour. Okay, how much pro footage
their outfits,
starts there. I mean, there's probably 5 minutes of pro footage, and then you have to mix in the videos and just show, that the Kiss was on a down again after Animalize and needed to rethink and try something new, something drastic. You talk about Gene taking time off to do all these projects in 1986, about Paul Stanley thinking about doing a solo album, which was reported in the press, and abandoning the idea to focus on writing and preparing for Crazy Nights. You get into why And again, you touched on part of that. Some of the bands that had opened for them had already overtaken them. Bon Jovi, Iron Maiden, Motley Crue.
Yeah.
So that really becomes a chapter in itself because you're talking about those bands. Look at Judas Priest, and I mean, even through the Fuel for Life tour in '86, they were still bigger and pulling in, again, it was spotty audiences like many bands like Rat at that point, but still bigger audiences than Kiss were pulling in. So that makes a nice bit of, you can draw in all these other bands to kind of contrast their fortunes, as this band started out opening for Kiss on the 1980 European Unmasked. They're now, on tour, and you can talk about Vinny and Ace opening for them, Iron Maiden in that case. Motley Crue obviously opened for them in '83, and by '87, well, they were just on the cusp really of, super multi-platinumness. So that's where it kind of builds. What's the live footage for these shows that you kind of envisage? You've mentioned a little bit in passing, but what are some of the scenes that you would be critical, or you think would be critical to telling your story, Daniel?
Well, I will mix from a few sources, but really in the start of the film, I would try to set the tone. It's a time of turmoil. Maybe the news report of Eric Carr dying, maybe including the LA riots, showing a brief clip of Nirvana playing live, and understanding that Kiss isn't very similar to them. Maybe even adding Bill Clinton being elected the president. So it would have been better if it was Bill Coyne, maybe.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So, but because there's some great stories from Clinton's era in office that could be used as a parallel story in this film. I'll talk more on that later. And maybe adding something from the films from that era. Maybe a shot from The Fugitive with Harrison Ford. When he's, I don't know if you've seen that film, but he's trying to escape, and he's changing his looks. He's coloring his hair and trying to look different and younger and cooler. And I think that's what Kiss put in a lot of effort into doing at this point of time. So I think you could use a few stuff like that, a few different clips like that, and then maybe just for laughs you could add some silly commercials from '92, like the Mark Wahlberg commercials when he's strutting around in boxer shorts or something.
No. 92, that means New Kids on the Block.
Yes.
And who was the British equivalent? I can't remember. Take That, or they come a little bit later.
Yeah.
Oh no, mercy.
Yeah, that would draw some laughter, I think. I think it would work. Just briefly, of course. Yeah. So I would start like that, and then later on I would move into live clips with Kiss. But first of all, you need to understand that Kiss was in a place they had dug themselves deep in a hole, and what now? What do they have to do in order to get out of that hole? And then they will start building up their confidence again in the next part of the film.
Right, Alex, don't worry. I can see you're muted, and you've got one hand with a bottle and the other hand holding babies. I'm going to go to Ken for, what are some of the key scenes that you really think would be critical to telling your story? And yours is so broad. You've got so many that you now have to try and fit in there. That's why you need someone like Andrew, who doesn't have an executive producer saying that's too long. You need to edit that out.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep it, kind of gloss over some of it, rather quickly. You can't just focus on 1 year too long. So, like I said, I think the Inner Sanctum would be a good showing part of that, how they were and when they were received in that building where they're on the, I don't know, what do you want, a balcony
Yeah, the Lord
of
Mayor's
that building.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and then going to the Elder, and their look again, like the look change. It's like they tried to change the music.
Well, here's a great sequence for changing that scene. You just have like a pair of clippers come across the screen, and
yeah,
the new Elder look appears.
Click, 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 click. Yeah, and it goes, and then with the creatures, they can have. I mean, there's not a whole lot, of course, of that, but there is a little bit. But there's some of the interviews during the time you could see they're down and depressed. Ace going out, Vinny coming in at that point. And then, like you said, maybe during when they go to the makeup part, you can see like these sponges or something, wiping the makeup off of their faces, and it shows their real faces behind the makeup. And I guess you could show part of the MTV, unmasking for the Lick It Up video that was on Sunday night at whatever 8 p.m. from what I remember. When they did that, revealed themselves. So, and then short, a little bit of concert footage and interviews during those time periods, and what was going on during those time periods as far as music and other bands that were relevant during those different years that we're going through.
So you've got a great era included in yours, because you can touch on some of the fundamentalists who the protests against the band in '83.
Oh yeah,
like the Peters brothers, right. The Wendy O. Williams angle. I mean that'd be some good screen time. Trying to bring acts like that out as well. So that would be very good. Alex, you able?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is the key footage and the kind of things that you'd want to include in your story.
So I know for me, like I mentioned, live footage, I'd be looking at like the Rio show, that New Orleans Creatures, news footage, for the live stuff. So I mean, again, there's not much. I totally get that, but there is a decent amount of interviews though that can be used to supplement a kind of a showing like that. Again, looking at the type of video that was made for the greatest show on earth, it's not like a full live Kiss concert. It's a portion, and so, I'm looking at like an hour like length or hour and a half. You can probably get an hour and a half. But so some of the press footage I would use would be the what came out, I guess, a couple years ago. From the Creatures of the Night press conference with Ace, there's the interview, and you can use some of that footage. I've also always liked the Night Flight interview.
Yeah,
that's out there, and then of course there's a couple other little interviews that are out there on the web. I know there's like the TMT interview. It's not a long one, stuff like that. There's enough little itty bitty
Night Flight, isn't there? Yeah.
But Night Flight, you've got like a good hour.
Yeah.
And stuff,
and scissors.
And of course, using scissors and splicing. There was of course the funny at the end of the interview, and even just before it too. In fact, I remember one of the things that stood out on like that unedited of the Night Flight was like the producer or whoever was in charge was like, "Okay, guys, lean in," kind of like you guys get along, kind of a thing. But so there's definitely footage that could help supplement and make a fun piece. And I guess if we were looking at it, like if it was made, 50 years from now, but a handful of years later, I wouldn't be against if they used some audio. Took audio. Don't use the video aspect, but took the audio of maybe a little bit of like from Vinny from the Atlanta Expo, stuff like that. I'm sure they could find little golden nuggets that they can use to supplement and beef up the show. Sorry, did I go too much?
No, not at all. And I was thinking of those 2 bits of footage that did surface on Getty a couple of years ago, which was obviously the pro shot version of the Creatures press conference, which had circulated for years in very poor audio form. It was great to finally get to see that and the magnificent stage, as well as obviously being able to hear everything crystal clear. So that's very good footage, and it's new enough that there are probably people out there who are now catching on to Andrew's sorts of movies that would be interested in seeing that. It might be new to them. The unaired MTV interview, which was also came out through Getty at the same time, was another great bit of footage, and some of the backstage stuff of them walking into the sound stage, which was also included in some of those clips, are great additions to the Creatures story. For Ken's, I'm thinking right on the board right now, the footage that's just surfaced for some people is Vienna 1981. When Eric and Gene flew out to Vienna to receive a music award, an Otto Award, I think it was. And I'm not even going to try and say the Austrian newspaper, Rebenhahn or Reeperbahn or something like that, Express. And they were on stage in front of 15,000 people, chucking out, I think it was Talk to Me singles into the audience, and the Austrian, I think, football team were there. So I'm just saying that there's more footage than what just surfaced, and they're interviewed backstage by, was it okay? Well, whatever, by someone. So that footage would be very new to someone, but it also serves as a great transition point for 1980 into 81. And almost, I think for the sequence, you'd need to have something like a Monty Python. And now, for something completely different, then the Clippers come across the screen, and you have them showing up in the final time that they wore the unmasked outfits, and Gene's clearly wearing a wig. Yeah, now for something completely different, go straight into Gene's Grotus screen test. If that one never... That's horrible. Absolutely horrible. All right, getting into my Crazy Nights one, what sort of footage? Well, I'm going to assume that NHK filmed both nights of Tokyo, and only the one circulates. Audio from both of them does circulate, so that would form the majority of the musical performance, if not the whole soundtrack, to that, because that performance has actually grown on me a lot. When I was doing the Danger Zone book, again, I've mentioned many times, it made me reevaluate what I felt about Crazy Nights, the album, and even in doing the research for it, it made me persuade myself that I liked it more than I actually did at the time, and I could appreciate more now what they were trying to do then. That's a complex sentence. Hope it made sense. But then I lose my train of thought. There's also stuff like the European Monsters of Rock tour, which has some great footage, where Gary Corbett, I think at Schweinfurt in Germany, shows up on the side of the stage, grinning like Gary does. And if you ever met Gary in person, Gary's like that. How your offstage musicians are supposed to be heard and not seen would be a great way of framing him into the story. There's also Philadelphia, the Spectrum, most of which was, I think, used as a Kissology bonus disc. So you get to focus a little bit more on the stage and the production for what was used in the majority of the United States, which was basically the animalized stage taken to its maximum metal grate, and nothing Kiss is reduced to just giant metal grates. It's their metal phase. And then I don't think there's a tremendous amount of other footage. I'd probably take some out of the Turn on the Night. Alex, thought?
Well, I was going to say, wasn't there like some back or behind the scenes of when they did the music videos? I'd seen some footage.
There was. There's about... I think at last count it's like 5 hours of Crazy Nights footage from the making of that video. I've never made it through it because that was one of the things I actually thought about doing was taking all of that footage and making an alternative mix of the Crazy Nights video with Paul Stanley's demo as the audio. So, but I'm not good enough. I simply don't have the skills to do it.
I was going to throw too. We just mentioned about the demo. I was curious on that too. There was a documentary that came out a couple years ago on Chicago, and they talk about David Foster, Peter Cetera, big hype. But anyways, they played part of a demo of Hard Habit to Break, where they actually had 3 of the guys singing it, and then of course they dropped Robert Lamb from singing it. But it was an interesting segue. So I was curious if you'd use like demos, maybe.
That's totally what I was going to go into when we talked about the music, but since you preempted me, let me just say that if you've ever watched, what was it, Def Leppard, which one is it? Is it Hysteria? That they are in the studio with Phil, and he's fiddling with the knobs on, what is it, Animal? Going through all the multi-tracks of what is there, the original stuff that was then not in the final mix. And I think it would be great to film Ron Nevison in the studio. Again, this is another current affairs kind of thing that he's talked again, as he did in the interview he gave with Tim years ago, about a desire to remix Crazy Nights. So it would be great to have footage of Ron Nevison in the studio on the multi-tracks of several of the songs, playing with the faders and taking tracks up and taking tracks down. And also, because it would be pre-mastered and pre-whatevered, you'd get a better feel for the material had it not been polished as much. So he would be able to take you through the dynamic range of it sounding hard rock to sounding pop rock, which I would be a great explanation of where he went with the sound in terms of the thinking and some of the tools that he did apply in the mid-1980s. It could be a very technical part of the documentary that some people would really love, and others would just hear the changes in the music and not really care. That sort of thing I would love. Music-wise, Daniel.
Well, I'm just going to go through my film as I'm thinking it will... how do you say it in English? Dramaturgically, Well, we started off, Kiss was down and out, so far from their goal of becoming a great big band again. So in this second part, I would show the beginnings of the Revenge era, when they started getting ready for releasing the album. Interviews where they are pushing the albums, getting good reviews. There are a lot of those, and it starts off quite well, So the audience of this movie would feel like, yeah, maybe they can make it. Maybe they can reemerge as one of the biggest bands once again, because they started off doing some interview with Ricky Rockman and presenting Eric Singer to the audience, and then they started off the club tour, which of course was a sellout. It was sold out. They sold out every club, of course, and you started to feel that maybe they can do something once again. And of course, I would have to include some of the biggest acts of this time. I think I would use a clip from Metallica when they're playing some of the music awards, and then maybe morph James Hetfield's face into Gene in the Unholy video, because come to think of it, I think Gene pretty much modeled himself after James Hetfield a bit. I mean, pretty close to James Hetfield's look. So then the audience would feel, well, maybe they are onto something. They're not that far away from the biggest band around. And of course, here you would use a few live clips or live videos from. There are quite a few pretty good single shot shows from the club tour. And I think a guy like Andrew could put something interesting together using those, and maybe using the sound from the Brooklyn show, because it sounds really good. So that would be the first part of them starting to establish themselves once again as a cool band. And maybe a part two of that would be the UK tour, which also was, from what I understand, a success. And you could include clips from the Headbangers Ball special with Vanessa Warwick. I think it's 35-40 minutes. Maybe
Dutch TV.
Yeah, Dutch TV as well. When they they didn't lip sync. They
played Unholy, I think.
They played, but I think the music was pre-recorded. But at least they sang. Not like these days.
Now it's the other way around. So what's the difference?
Yeah, exactly. But you could also use. There are 2 songs from their show at Wembley, I think it is, when they play "I Stole Your Love" and "Deuce," and it's filmed professionally by a single camera. Maybe you could find some good high quality of that and include that. And this would be the anticipation. You feel the anticipation. You feel that Kiss might come back, and that's important in a movie to like root for the band. Yeah, they're gonna make it, but then things starts to go south later on.
Yeah, I've been really bad at watching footage from the Revenge era. I mean, I know when they were in London, there was the Kiss convention that I think Gene and Paul attended briefly. So I wonder if there's any pro footage of that.
Oh, yeah.
That would be fun. One thing I'm surprised you didn't say when you're talking about the contemporary bands of 1991, 92, you've mentioned Nirvana, you've mentioned Metallica, you've left one big one out. And Lonnie would be very upset. Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, of course.
And while it's a little bit later than, say, the beginning of the Revenge cycle, the riots that they were causing was, kind of hearkening back to the 70s and some of the concert drama. Same with Metallica. When did Jane set himself on fire? Was that 92 as well? Because it was, because they were pissed that Guns N' Roses didn't kind of step up and help. So all of that.
Of course.
Revenge. I mean, it really could easily become more about 1992, that behind the music, 1992 and whatnot. Ken, let's go to you on your era and your movie. What are the dynamics of the music that you want to make sure are featured? And then we're going to pick a few songs that are critical to telling the story for each one of these movies.
Yeah, I think just during the period, I mean, we're going through a whole bunch of albums and just giving a background of the style of music that they were doing at the time. So I would have that running in the background, kind of like similar to how they did, what was it? Face to Music? What was the VH1 special? Not Face to Music, but Behind the Makeup, I think it was called.
Behind the Music.
Beyond the Makeup. Beyond the Makeup.
Beyond the Makeup. I have the bootleg of that. Yeah, where the music is playing in the background, little snippets of that time period that they're in. And as they mentioned, like I said, the other bands, they could also, play some of those other bands, snippets of their music, or a little shot of, for instance, Motley Crue on stage doing a little part of one of their songs, or, any of those bands. So I would definitely have that kind of music going in the background, besides, again, trying to show any kind of live performances and how they were trying to get back. And stuff about the tour. I mean, where they were having a hard time selling tickets, from even through Lick It Up, they weren't selling. I mean, they were downgrading shows in arenas during that time period. So I would continue with that. If we can put any music videos in there during the time, because they made a lot of music videos during the time, they can have snippets from those too, because you got to show those Asylum outfits. And when you get to that point, for sure, seeing like what they did, and then the album covers and so on. But they can still talk about Gene and what he was branching off into, trying to produce other artists and bands and artists, and not focusing, and about Paul, kind of taking the reins and steering the ship through the 80s. So
cool. Alex, while you can speak, what are some of the key musical sequences and scenes that you'd envisage being important to your story?
So I like the same thing with Beyond the Makeup. I thought that was such a tremendously done documentary on the band, especially the music. I mean, I was kind of coming in. Oh, I've always been like a Kiss fan, but that was like the one that kind of got me really going and getting the remasters and stuff. And so I remember hearing clips of songs. So I definitely like that type of editing, outside the live footage. I would stick to a lot of obviously Creatures era for the music, but I would be willing to throw in some of the demos in the background, like It's My Life, like the one that's on the Gene Simmons vault. You can have that in the background as they're talking of working on the album and stuff. But I thought for like a closing credits aspect for it, for the my envision of like a Creatures era going into look it up would be the Not for the Innocent with the Gene and Paul trade off vocals.
I love that.
Just as like, because it's like, you get the JJ Jackson going, we're not going to see Kiss without the makeup, but then it ends with that version though, because it's not like what's on Lick It Up, but it was a Creatures era. So I just think like that would be really great. And then, obviously, you have to touch up a little bit pre. She's singing along too. You have to touch up a little bit pre getting into the Creatures era, and they can use some of the music of the time for like a brief overview, but really just a lot of the Creatures era material on some of the demos.
Awesome. Wrong button. For mine, well, I've mentioned some of the music that I think would be important is going through the demos and showing how things really changed with being overproduced or not. That's such an unfair term to use for Ron, and I apologize. It's not overproduced. He produced exactly to spec. But I want to have some of the other music in mind be the demos of Sword and Stone, Hide Your Heart, stuff that was left off the album. You've mentioned The Vault, so Dial L for Love again, and Are You Always This Hot? Or, those are the big ones for what was left off. And in the case of Sword and Stone, many fans feel aggrieved that was left off. In terms of music sequences, I think the videos that were made for this album serve that purpose perfectly. Crazy Nights, just you to rip out the footage either from the uncut version of that video. Reason to Live has an important, prominent place in this, but I think it's important also to go to some of the studios, and I want to have some Captain and Tennille in my Crazy Night story, because that really sets the stage for pop music and kind of Paul Stanley, just having Captain and Tennille playing in the background of talking about the monologue, of talking about what Paul Stanley's aim or goals were for this album. Because, of course, they recorded at Rumbo Recorders, which was Daryl Dragon's studio.
Yeah.
So that's why it's nice to tie those little pieces of minutia, those silly little threads together. And someone will get it. They're like Easter eggs for geeks. Someone will be like, oh, ha, ha, I get it. Oh, Captain and Tennille's playing and they're at Rumbo.
They'll keep us together. Yeah.
Yeah. So and again, that song, when Gene and Paul are on the outs and Paul basically hates Gene at this time, and
that's perfect.
You get to face the music, and Paul tells the story of Gene buying him the Porsche, the one that was used in the video. So there's so many little things that you can do, but it's also important to tell the current affairs of 1987. So you got to have some Margaret Thatcher. You got to have some Ronnie Reagan. You got to have some of the politics of that era, some of the big news of 86, 87, maybe some of the PMRC hearings. I can't remember, was that 87 or 86 or 85? I think it was 85. But it still colors the era of music that if you didn't have that parental guidance sticker on the front of your album, you basically guaranteed you weren't going to sell 1 million copies. Because you were guaranteed to sell more with a parental guidance sticker on, because there had forbidden fruit. You want to take a bite of that apple. You had a thought there, Alex?
Yeah, would you, because you're speaking of Crazy Nights, would you at all use any of the Smashes Thrashes period stuff at all, or would you just avoid that altogether?
I don't know. Over the closing sequence, maybe Paul swinging from the...
Everyone should avoid that one.
Or when he's dancing in his chainmail. It's just not a good era to focus on. but it does kind of bookend the Crazy Nights era, because 88, they're doing the European Monsters of Rock tour. They did outdoor festival. Well, they did one in Swansea, New Hampshire, and then they went outside for the Monsters of Rock. So Monsters of Rock has to be part of the story, because they're on tour opening at Donington for 90,000 people. And Iron Maiden's the headliner. David Lee Roth and them are flipping on the bill. Who else was on there? Yngwie was supposed to open for them when they went on the road by themselves. And so, that's like a whole part too, that European one, because then you get into Gary Corbett's stories of what they got up to, or what Eric Carr got up to in Holland, Amsterdam specifically. So there's a lot to that era, which I think it could be visually appealing. I don't know how much footage there is from local news out there. There's certainly a lot of news stock footage for Donington that year because of the deaths that occurred at the festival. But for the rest of it in Europe and Scandinavia, I'm not too certain. And there weren't that many of these monster shows, to be honest. I mean, I think they went to Hungary for one. And I'd have to pull up the website, which I'm not willing to do right now. But I think that's a great story, because you also can end with, while they're out here for the Monsters of Rock, Paul Stanley's going into the studio to record new songs for their greatest hits album. But I don't really want to have either of those. Maybe You Make Me Rock Hard, because that's a little bit less bad than the other one.
You could always end it too on like Paul going off the solo tour and be like, I don't know.
I think one thing I would religiously try and not do with mine is use any footage out of the exposed video. So there'd be no chimpanzees, there would be no saunas, there would be
no dorky interview.
no butlers. I don't know. I like the pie in the face though. That's and Paul Stanley's workout and post Wheaties, because I'm a rough kind of guy. I love that. I gotta watch that this weekend. So I think avoiding some of the stuff that was released on that. Daniel, would you avoid the stuff that was incorporated on kind of the Alive 3 video? Kiss Confidential and Kiss Extreme Close Up.
Well, it's hard, because I think the final part of the movie have to include the greatness of Kiss playing live during this period. And the only concerts that's really out there, from 92 at least, there are a few from 94, but from 92 is the Detroit concert. So I think I will have to use that one.
Bethlehem, first night.
Yeah.
It's one of the better audience ones, but there was also MTV footage shot at the rehearsals there as well, I believe. Yeah. And of course, MTV footage, as you mentioned, from the club tour.
Yeah, but at least you would have to show like War Machine from Detroit, because that's just such an awesome performance, and maybe a few others. And then you would have to include other clips that showed that I would cross-cut between live clips from Detroit and maybe attendance numbers, so you understand what is happening. And it would be such a contrast between how good the band looked, how well they performed, and the audience just not getting it. And that, of course, you could include other video clips like the one from A Few Good Men. You can't handle the truth. Jack Nicholson's great line, because Gene and Paul couldn't handle it, that they really didn't have the audience to play arenas. They should have played smaller places. And, playing the last card, Alive 3, I would like to include the performance from Arsenio Hall show, because I think it's one of the best TV performances of Kiss's career, actually. And once again, you could include like a scene from Groundhog Day, that movie with
Bill Murray. Love it.
Yeah, it's a good one. And everything just starts over. No matter what he does, he wakes up and it's the same situation once again. And that was really what it was like for Kiss. No matter what they did, they couldn't, get out of they couldn't get the audiences. And as a final touch, you could actually add a scene from Jurassic Park, because most people thought they were like dinosaurs. And for the last scene, I would probably use the one from the American Music Awards in '93, when they are handing an award to Scott Weiland and the Stone Temple Pilots. It's sort of passing the baton on to the new guys. And maybe add a scene from Once Were Warriors, that film from New Zealand about the Maori people. There's just such a good scene that a lot of Maori people are sitting around a guy. They have tattoos all over their faces, and they're mocking the guy without the tattoos sitting in the middle. So it kind of resembles me of, Kiss without makeup, Kiss with makeup, and I would end it with that scene maybe.
That's really deep. Alex, going to your Creatures movie, I'm just watching some footage here on the computer that we haven't mentioned. Pop Rock, 82 Holland. I love it.
Oh, yeah.
It's absolutely stunning. And what else is on here?
I forgot to mention, I think, showing some of the footage, the promotional footage. There's the one on Kissology 2. That's I Love a Lot. Is that the one you just mentioned?
Yeah.
And then there's Creatures of the Night.
Yep.
Where they lip synced, and obviously Ace was there.
Yeah.
There's some real good live performances from some TV news, whether you see the explosions going off and everything. I think.
I forgot to mention audio too. There's also that really excellent Universal City, that Los Angeles show. That you were at that show, weren't you, Ken?
I was there. Yeah,
they're perfect. We could have Ken in there. Ken could be on the video,
that on vinyl,
detailing his story.
Yeah.
But you could throw some of the other songs that those on video footage of live in the background as like a like Ice. Like I've always liked the "I Still Love You" from that performance and stuff, even the live. And everybody likes the unplugged version, which is excellent. But I think there was some good live in the '80s too of "I Still Love You" that they could use in the background.
Would you do anything with Rio then? Would you use that?
Oh yeah, Rio would be kind of like the main footage for the live concert portion and stuff. And I was going to ask you, Daniel, I didn't get the chance earlier, but if it was to come out, because there's that really great interview that I think, Julian, you posted from '91, Kiss in the studio with the Brutus.
Yeah, Lou Brutus, WHYJ or something, Providence, Rhode Island.
And he talks about, they're already going into the next album and doing the pre-production. Would you be willing to use it if their audio was to surface from that? Would that be something you'd throw in there?
Yeah, there's so much you can throw in. That's one of them. And the one when Eric Carr is telling everyone that he's getting better. And that would be kind of interesting to have on this as well. And of course, you would have to end paying homage to Eric somehow with something. Maybe Eric Carr jam in the background. So you hear that or something.
I don't know. The last episode of FAQ, Carr jam wasn't everybody's favorite.
No, but it's
No,
it's
because something has to be down at the bottom. And, I think one of the things I thought about afterwards when I was reading some of the comments on the YouTube feed for it, and no one actually mentioned it, but I suddenly thought, I'd criticize them for taking off Ace's guitar work and putting on Bruce. But you know what? I didn't consider one angle of that, and that was that Bruce was allowed to pay tribute to Eric himself by doing that guitar work on Car Jam. So exactly. It wasn't necessarily a slight to Ace. I think thinking about it a bit more than I did during that show, it was more of a tribute from Bruce to Eric, much like they had jammed No, No, No in the intro, to that during the Crazy Nights tour. They jammed on stage together, those two. So it was kind of a nice bookend. And I hadn't considered that. I didn't want to just throw that in there because you're talking about the Revenge era. And that, of course, was last week's show. And, it was something that I felt. It almost seemed like a dig at Bruce, which it certainly wasn't. And I just kind of would have preferred Ace's stuff to be there. But then thinking about it more, it's perfectly fine. Bruce paying tribute to Eric as well in that way, and at least makes it fit in with the album better.
Good clarification.
Yeah, and don't call me out on that either. It's
No.
not that anyone ever calls me out for anything on that.
Never.
All right, so any final thoughts on each of your episodes? Alex, you've done a fantastic job of juggling, talking, thinking, feeding, burping, entertaining. I mean, what you're doing on that side of the camera is way more important than this side, so more power to you. Thank you for being a part of the show and multitasking with your daughter, especially she's so young, so pretty. Nice to
appreciate it.
Nice to see a young dad. You're doing a great job. So.
But yeah, final thoughts. I'd like to see some of this stuff continue, whether it's other people getting involved in doing it. I think the concept of like the greatest show on earth and other things are all a great concept. And as fans, I think it almost puts an outlet in, it's funny, I think sometimes us as fans, we know what we'd love to see than maybe the band would love to see. And
Exactly.
And that's the great thing. Sometimes when you see some of these fan-made things is they're hitting out because they know what they want. I mean, I think that's why Tommy, especially like when you look at like Beyond the Makeup and stuff like that he had a hand in, with being a fan, because he knew that's what the fans would like. So I'd like to see some more stuff come out, whether it's the greatest show on earth people, or if it was somebody else with some talent with editing skills, with like iMovie or whatever other film type programs are out there. There's so much to see and do, and who knows, maybe Kiss might, I don't know if they've seen him or anything, but maybe they might see it. Heck, I'd be, I've seen Kiss now a couple of times with Alan's book and Nicholas Buckland's book, Hottest Brand in the Land. They sanction and maybe Kiss might say, hey, you know what, we like what you did, we're gonna sanction that,
we own all of it anyway.
Yeah, we'll authorize it, let's put our name on it, and we'll give you credit, we'll send you a signed copy. It'd be cool.
We won't sue you. You never know. Daniel, your kind of final thoughts on all of this?
Well, I would just like to, much like Alex said, it would be great to see fans do more movies, because the editing tools are out there. It's not that hard. I mean, it really comes down to having a lot of free time. And most of us have to juggle kids and work and being an adult and a parent. So if these type of editing tools were available back in the 90s, I sure would have done one or two movies. But I really can't find the time to do it now. So I just have to say I really appreciate the work that Andrew has done. And I hope more people will follow in his footsteps, because I think Kiss fans really appreciate these kinds of movies. And it can't be underlined enough how fun and great it is to see these type of movies. So I want to see more of them.
Yeah, this is just fantasy time, talking about some ideas and concepts that might interest us personally. I don't have the skills or patience. It's a matter of patience more than anything else, because I've got all the video editing software. I don't have Final Cut Pro. I just don't have the patience to really sit and think it through. I've done audio ones, and you might even get to hear one of these days. But video, that's a whole different ball of wax, because it's so visual. And in order to tie a story, that's why I like what Andrew did with basing The Greatest Show on Earth on What If the Alive 2 album was a television special. And, what hopefully we'll get to see in Kiss at Midnight is similar for, the Alive era. So the idea of doing it for a different era, I really go more into Alan Parker's way of storytelling, and less heavy on the interviews, because obviously the Sgt. Pepper's one, which I finally watched for the first time the other night, and I regret not watching it sooner because it was extremely well done. But I want to see a more musical one, which has a lot of problems because of licensing rights and footage and all of that stuff. So it is easier to go out and get new interviews to string a story together than it is to do what I think he'd wanted to do with the hottest band in the world, or You Wanted the Best, or what the heck was its title. So, if something that we've said today motivates someone to, go out and do it, it doesn't have to be Andrew. It could be anyone. But I think Andrew has started to build a nice little niche for himself. So I hope he will become motivated to make this a habit, not just a passing fancy, because, there's 2 in the can. And what's next? You're only as good as your next project, as I've often heard. Ken, you're the voice of reason, so lead us out with your final thoughts.
Well, it's kind of sad that it's Kiss has left the fans, to do this, to put these documentaries out, and I don't understand why they cannot do a proper documentary. Even though there's a canned one out there, the Parker one, just come on, let's do it. Do a proper documentary. It should be done. They have a storied career. It's really just ridiculous. I mean, they can do one like the Tom Petty documentary or the Eagles documentary. A lot of these are they're fantastic documentaries. Then they run long. Obviously, there's long careers, but I think it's great that Andrew is doing these videos, because Kiss is not doing them, so some fan might as well do them and give it to the other fans out there, and have them enjoy it. So I just think it's a sad thing that Kiss is not putting anything out. Really lacking in videos, like I think Daniel was saying, or Alex was saying, maybe all of us were saying, they're just not putting anything out, and they're the most visual band ever. It just doesn't make sense. And if they do one, they try to do one, besides doing it like a Tom Petty, they could do it like a Beatles anthology or something like that.
You just said what I was going to say. Beatles anthology.
I have that, and that would be fantastic. I mean, it can be 10 hours. I mean, and you know what? They could easily fill that. No problem.
Please don't skimp. I was listening to Rock Growing Up Rock podcast, and YNT has got a documentary coming out, and Dave Meniketti said, at first it was going to be like 7 hours. We had to cut it down to like 2. And I'm like, no, Don't cut it down to 2. You can put as many discs on there as you want. I will buy it. Take my money.
Well, like the anthology, you get the director's cut, because that's basically the version before the director's forced to cut. Is kind of what I always take that to be. And Meniketti, he was in the news today. He's now going to be offering pay to watch the sound checks, which I find hilarious coming from YNT. But that's beside the point. All right. My final thoughts is, it doesn't matter who does it, just I hope people keep doing it. Sasha did a unmasked anthology years ago. I'll have to dig that one out again, when talking about redoing, the Inner Sanctum. I can't remember what that was, but I think Andrew set a good high bar that other fans will hopefully think, I want to do a documentary. Well, what is your documentary going to be? Is it going to be about an era, or is it going to be about your country? Because there's plenty of countries that I would love to do their documentaries. Scandinavia, Sweden in particular, Germany, England, and
Japan.
And when we talk about the Inner Sanctum, Australia, I mean, come on, focus on your own country if you want, or someone in New York City. New York City is a country. There are so many different ways.
Much like Carl Linnaeus is doing now with the release of his book, where he's focusing on his fandom and how he found Kiss, and how he became a fan, and how Kiss has
been evolving in Sweden when it comes to popularity and so on. I think that would be perfect for a film.
Yep, I mean, the Swedes are the next level Kiss fans. I mean, you're just totally out there in terms of the stuff. I mean, Carl has been a part of many great books actually, because there are other ones, and very few of them are in English. You know, he does share quite a bit of his interview clips on YouTube that a lot of his writing was based on. But great stories, and you know, I want to watch documentaries. I had Netflix for a bit because of the dirt. And I found that all I was doing was watching documentaries. I was watching rushes behind, whatever it was. Can't remember.
Beyond the Lighted Stage?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
which I actually have on DVD, but because it was on Netflix and in front of my face, I just watched it again. Foo Fighters, Back and Forth, Johnny Cash. You know, I wasn't watching any of the TV shows. I don't care about that. Documentaries are just, I find, really entertaining, and I think Kiss fans enjoy that sort of thing because, come on, they're not that different from a podcast that, you know, hopefully entertain you for an hour. And since we're at an hour, let's call that an episode. We're over an hour, actually. We don't want to be too long here. Daniel, great topic, and thank you for staying up late to join us for an episode. Alex, thank you for joining us with your little bundle of joy. And Ken, of course, as always, thank you. And to you, the listeners and watchers, thank you very much for joining us today. What are your thoughts on the topics that we've discussed today? Ace Frehley's news, whatever. Daniel's topic, you know, an era of the band's history that you would like turned into a documentary, and how you would approach it. What era, and what are some of the key things that you'd like to see featured in it, you know, just as a basic thing. So chime in wherever you watch or read or find out about this episode, and we'll hopefully see you next time. So bye for now.
Editor out of.
Thank you for spending time listening to the KissFAQ podcast today. All sales are final. There are no refunds. If you'd like, look us up on Facebook or come over to the KissFAQ message board and discuss the topic we've broadcast today. Don't forget to rate us on iTunes, Spreaker, or wherever you've listened to the show. We hope you'll join us again.